This video is intended to provide a beginner level breakdown of detachments, where command points come from, and why I think you should start your army with a battalion detachment. To begin with, detachments are explained in the main rulebook, and those are what define the organization of your army. If you're familiar with the datasheet section of your specific army codex, you'll have noticed the battlefield rule icons in the top corner of each datasheet. Those icons define which role each unit fills in your specific army. For example, troops, fast attack, elites, HQs, etc. A detachment defines how many of each role can be included in your army. This might seem a little prohibitive and unfun, but it's intended to reward people for playing with a more well-rounded force. The reward for using detachments is that of command points. After the datasheet section of your codex can be found in the stratagem section. If you've read through these, you'll know that they typically allow specific units to bend the typical rules of the game to have more powerful interactions for a limited time frame. For example, some stratagems allow units to shoot twice in the shooting phase, some allow units to fight twice in the fight phase, some make them tougher, some allow them to move twice, etc. Attached to each stratagem is a command point cost, typically between 1 and 3. The cost of the stratagem is relative to its power and is intended to force you to budget your army's special abilities for the most efficient times. So how do you generate command points? By filling the required slots in a specific detachment, each of which has a specified command point reward for doing so. For example, a patrol detachment, the easiest to fill out, requires just one HQ unit and one troop unit. However, as it's the easiest to fill out, it doesn't give you any command points. Now, it's a bummer, but it's important to note that you get 3 command points to begin with just for using detachments in the first place. So if the only bounds you're willing to commit to are that of 1 HQ, 1 troop, and then whatever else, you'll still start the game with 3 command points. Now, if you've looked at your stratagem pages, you'll probably know that 3 command points isn't going to get you very far with all the fun abilities you want to use in the game. So you'll probably want to use detachments that give you more than 0 command points. There's 4 detachments that each reward 1 command point. Outrider for using 1 HQ and at least 3 fast attack. Vanguard for using 1 HQ and at least 3 elites. Spearhead for using 1 HQ and at least 3 heavy support. And an air wing, which uses at least 3 flyers. There's a few others, but we won't get into those as they're not typically going to be used in a more beginner level environment. So using one of those detachments will start you off with 4 command points. You'll get your beginning 3 and then 1 more from each of those detachments. Now, if you've looked through your army options, you'll probably know that those types of units, the elites, fast attack, heavy support, are generally the more fun and interesting type units. So those detachments might look pretty appealing. But 4 command points still isn't that many, and will be spread pretty thinly over 3+ fancier units, all of which want to be powered up with those stratagems. That's where the troop-focused detachments come in. A battalion detachment rewards 5 extra command points and requires you to use 2 HQs and at least 3 troop choices. Side note real quick, if you're looking at your rulebook, you'll notice the battalion detachment says it awards 3 command points, but this has been FAQ'd up to 5 to reward you further for using troops. Likewise, the brigade detachment has been FAQ'd from 9 up to 12 command points. Again, you can find those FAQs in the Warhammer community page. Speaking of the brigade detachment, that is the one detachment that rewards the most command points, but that requires you to use at least 3 HQs, at least 6 troop choices, and then 3 each or more of fast attack, elites, and heavy support. This detachment can be pretty challenging to achieve without playing at higher points level games. 2 additional notes to keep in mind are that each detachment also allows you to take other units from other battlefield roles aside from what it requires. For example, if you were to take a battalion detachment, You would need those 2 HQs, 3 troops, but you could still include elites, fast attack, etc. You just don't get any added benefits in command points for having those units in your detachment. Second is that you can use more than one detachment. For example, if you were committed to taking 3 fast attack units, but you wanted more command points than just the one you'd get from an outrider, you could start with your battalion with 2 HQs and 3 troops, and then also have an outrider detachment with your 3 fast attack, and you just have to take 1 more HQ to fill out that outrider detachment. This would give you a total of 9 command points, 3 for using detachments in the first place, 5 for your battalion, and 1 for the outrider. 1,000 point games are generally advised to have no more than 2 detachments per side, and 2,000 point games are generally advised to have no more than 3 detachments per side. This is covered in the rulebook, but it's just a recommendation and not a hard and fast rule. So why do I think newer players should start with a battalion? The first and most obvious reason that I've already touched on a little bit is that it gives you more command points to start the game with. When learning your army, you'll need to learn how and when to use your command points most efficiently to leverage your army's special abilities to win. This is easier and more forgiving if you start with more in the first place. Secondly, and much more importantly, a battalion forces you to include troops in your army. Now, troops aren't the sexiest units in the game, and having to include them in your army for the sake of getting command points is generally referred to as the troop tax. But troops do more for you than just granting you those command points at the beginning of the game. There's 2 ways to win a game of Warhammer 40k. The first is to outscore your opponent in the mission you're playing, and the second is to just destroy your opponent's entire army. Now, depending on the mission you're playing, destroying your opponent's army might not even win you the game if they still have more points than you do at the end of the final turn. So your primary focus as a new player should be learning how to play the mission rather than simply destroying your opponent's army. That's where troops come in. All of the troop units in the game share one rule. Now, that rule has different names for each faction, but it's collectively referred to as objective secured. This rule says that if a troop unit is on an objective and your opponent tries to contest the objective with another unit that isn't a troop battlefield role, your troops automatically control it, regardless of the other unit being close. This can be key to scoring mission points and winning the game, because any other type wouldn't score that objective point unless they had more models on the objective than the opponent unit. For example, if you had 1 elite model on an objective and your opponent moved 1 fast attack model onto the same objective, neither of you would control it and neither would get the point. If, however, your opponent moved 2 fast attack models onto the objective, they would control it over your single elite model just because there's more of them on the objective. Now, if your elite model was instead a troop model, even 1 measly Imperial Guardsman, for example, it wouldn't matter how many other models your opponent put on that objective. Your troop unit would still control it just because it's a troop battlefield role. Of course, he likely wouldn't survive for terribly long after that, but getting that 1 point at a pivotal time can be all the difference in who wins and loses. So learning how to play the mission and score mission points or victory points should be your primary focus rather than just trying to obliterate your opponent's army. And that's what troops do best. Now remember, you can still take your fancy elite units in the battalion to have fun with. When you were trying to decide on which army to play, there was probably a specific unit that caught your eye, and that could have been the deciding factor in choosing that specific army. That unit was probably an elite or an HQ character or a heavy support tank or maybe a fast attack squad of jet bikes. It probably wasn't the troops. You can still use that unit in your battalion, and because you paid the troop tax, you'll have plenty of command points to use on stratagems to make your favorite unit even more deadly while you're using your troops to win the game. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions or comments or any ideas for future videos, anything you'd like more information on, Please comment down below, like, subscribe, tell a friend. See you around.